So you just got the call that you've been accepted to an interview, and they let you know that during this interview, they actually want you to teach a demo lesson, and you're not quite sure how to go about it. Well, back in the day when I was looking for my first teaching position, I applied to three districts. Of those three districts, two of them called me back for interviews, and both of them required a demo lesson from me. And so some of those demo lessons and those interviews went so well. I had actually printed out my lesson plan for each of the people in the interview committee, and I'd given it to them. And it went so well that the principals ended up keeping my templates and sending it to other teachers in the district for examples or templates that they can use for their observations. So, over the past few years, since that day, I've been helping and coaching new and first year teachers around the world how to confidently land their next or first teaching position with interviews that require demo lessons. In the past, on my free content, I've talked about what you should be doing during a demo lesson, but now let's talk about what you should avoid during a demo lesson. Some of these mistakes I've seen or heard teachers make in the past, and we're going to talk about it here. So, with that being said, let's dive in. Hey, teacher bestie, my name's Helena, and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast, you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here. First mistakes I see a lot of teachers make when it comes to having a demo lesson or doing a demo lesson for an interview is they have too much content. So the reality is you may not have a lot of time during your demo lesson to cover a lot of content. And one thing I actually recommend doing is reaching out to the district ahead of time and asking how long this lesson needs to be. Both of the ones I did had to be anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, so something that was super short and speaks and to the point. And the thing is, it doesn't need to be this big, fancy, confusing lessons because when you go about doing it that way, it's very easy for things to go wrong. Instead, districts are looking to see whether or not you can pick a standard and objective and whether or not your students can meet proficiency towards your objective by the end of the lesson. They're not looking for a big, broad, you know, awesome, perfect, fluffy lesson. They're looking to see, do you actually know how to teach? Can you actually take a standard, take a skill, create a lesson about it, help students get proficiency towards that skill, and show that they know and they have proficiency towards that skill by the end of the lesson. So that's the first mistake I see a lot of teachers make. The second one that I see a lot of teachers make is they rely too heavily on technology. Now, don't get me wrong. Some integration of technology can be great. But it can be overwhelming if you run into tech issues along the way. Maybe that classroom in particular won't have access to a specific program, something won't be able to come up, maybe the internet's down for the day. Either way, relying solely on technology during your lesson, while yes, can show and model that you know how to incorporate technology in a proficient and engaging way, it can actually take away from the lesson if the district isn't fully prepared or if they are having tech issues for that day. So, if you are going to integrate technology into your lessons, make sure to have a backup just in case things don't go well. The third mistake I see a lot of teachers make is they do not bring enough supplies for their demo lesson. You never want to have to stop a demo lesson because there isn't enough to go around. There's not enough materials, handouts, etc. So that's why I make sure, and all the teachers that I've coached in the years past, I recommend to bring extra, if not double the amount of materials you will need ahead of time. And if you have extra, I always like to give extra materials to the people in the interview committee so they can see very closely what we are using and what we are working with so they can analyze it closer. And so make sure you bring double the amount of materials you'll think you will need. Another great example for this, during my first demo lesson, it was a fourth grade demo lesson, and I was supposed to teach a math lesson. And they actually combined two classes. So I had a class of over 35 students. Thank goodness I had asked ahead of time. They let me know, hey, you should only have 15 students. I actually brought over 30 materials just in case, and I'm so glad I did because I ended up combining classes last minute. So both teachers could be there as a part of the interview committee, which was totally fine. I was able to be flexible because I had those materials already prepped. The other mistake I see a lot of teachers make when it comes to demo lessons is only assessing comprehension of the lesson once or proficiency in the skill or the objective once. So when you are in a demo lesson, the committee wants to see whether or not you're checking for understanding throughout the lesson and if you can reteach on the spot or a skill as needed. So that's why I have been trained when I was student teaching and just in general, I always check for understanding at least 3 times before moving on in a lesson or reaching the end of a lesson. If students don't comprehend a skill, I take that time to go back and reteach before moving forward. There are a couple of different ways I like to check for understanding. There can be things like turning and talking, think, pair, share, gallery walks, thumbs up, thumbs down, poll, a quick quiz, etc. But just having these ways to check for understanding throughout the lesson to make sure that your students are getting the skills and the background knowledge that they need to be successful in this lesson is really important. And if you find during the demo lesson your students don't have the background knowledge they need, make sure to take that time to teach it because districts are going to be more engaged and excited about your lesson if you're able to reteach on the spot than if you were to follow a perfect lesson plan because the reality is you came into a classroom and you don't quite know your students' background knowledge, you could have asked, but it could be hard to pinpoint that. And you're showing what a real day as a teacher looks like. Oftentimes we go in expecting our students to be one way and they're not there yet. So we spend the day reteaching skills that they're going to need instead. And that's perfectly fine to do. All right, so the other mistake I see a lot of teachers make is they only lecture the whole time. Now, I come from an elementary standpoint, so if this is particularly important for secondary and your district that you're applying to isn't a huge advocate for hands-on learning and high engagement and student involvement, then feel free to skip this part. But I've seen a lot of teachers who just stand at the front of the classroom and they teach the whole time. And the problem is, comprehension is just the bottom or tier 1 of learning. The reality is there are different tiers of mastery, and one of those, the higher you go, the more hands-on students need to be. So make sure you give students the opportunity to interact with the lesson and to interact with each other. A good way to do this that I was taught through my ESL endorsement was I do, we do, you do. So the teacher does it first, then we do it together, then the student does it by themselves. So it's the release model. I do it first, then we do it together with some guidance, and then you do it. The next mistake I see a lot of teachers make when it comes to their demo lesson is they neglect classroom management. Make sure you don't neglect classroom management. Don't be so married to the lesson plan that you are neglecting setting expectations and running your classroom and how you expect the classroom to run during the lesson. So a great way to do this is to shout out students who are following the expectations and specifically what expectations they are following. This can sound like, all right, class, we are going to do a gallery walk. Here's what it should look like. It should look like walking feet at a level 1 or 0, hands to ourselves, whispering, writing. Everyone should be leaning forward. It shouldn't look like running and, I'll go into running, hands on each other, etc. And then why is it important we do that way? We'll have a discussion about it. And then when the students, I release them to work on said calorie walk, I'm then going to say, I love how group purple or purple group or group 1 is working quietly, or they're using whispering. They're at a voice level 1 and they're working together. They're leaning forward. I love how table 2 is using walking feet, and start pointing out what specific expectations that group or that student is following. So another thing is to give procedures and expectations as you go. Clearly, they don't expect you to have perfect classroom management per se when you go in, but you can do exactly what I just did, where you can talk about what it should look like and sound like. You have a discuss on what it shouldn't look like and sound like, and then you discuss why it should look like and sound like the first way instead of the second way, and what happens if we don't follow the expectations. If you decide to run in class, then the expectation is you go back and you try again, which takes more time, which you won't have enough time to finish. So, giving those logical consequences as you go is going to be really important. So, the committee wants to see your classroom management in action, so don't be afraid to do that. You can add your own class calls, whatever it is that you do, but this is where your personality is really going to shine. So, don't be afraid to do that. Another mistake I see a lot of teachers make is they neglect or they're not being flexible, or they neglect being flexible. So the idea is things may not go to plan, and that's okay to go with the flow. So I have actually a perfect example of this. When I found out I was going to do a demo lesson for one of the positions, I reached out to the teacher whose classroom I was expected to teach, and she told me by that point we should be on this lesson. Go ahead and teach that. Listen from my curriculum. Here's the pages. So I went ahead and I prepped all the materials. I prepped extra. This was that fourth grade class. I prepped 30 extra materials for that class. And as I was getting ready to teach the lesson, I saw this teacher look pale white and extremely red. And as I started teaching, I noticed these kids hadn't exactly gotten any of the prior lessons that they needed in order to be successful. So I pivoted. I was flexible and I went back to the basics and kind of went completely off script and just started talking about the basics of that lesson or the lessons they should have had previously, even though I didn't have the curriculum in front of me. So even though that happened, and even though technically it was definitely not my fault, me being flexible, I truly believe was one of the reasons I still got offered that teaching position during that interview. So, to wrap it up, there are several mistakes to avoid during your teacher demo lesson. The first thing is too much content. Second thing, relying too heavily on technology. Third thing, not bringing extra supplies. Fourth thing, only checking for understanding once during a lesson. Fifth, only lecturing the whole time. Next, neglecting classroom management. And finally, not being flexible. So that wraps up all of the mistakes I've seen or heard or witnessed as someone who's been on several interview committees teachers do when it comes to demo lessons. If you want to dive deeper into this whole teacher interview topic, I want to invite you to check out my previous content. Wherever you're tuning in from, I promise you I have a ton of content on teacher interviewing, so make sure to go check that out. The second thing I want to invite you to check out is my teacher interview guide. This is a guide where I rounded up, where I put together the top 10 questions I get asked about interviewing as a new teacher, things like what to wear, how to prep for a demo lesson, how to answer interview questions, stuff like that. And I answered them all in one spot in one guide. What I like about this guide is you can go to the index, find your question, go to that page for my answer, and if you want a more in-depth answer, I actually link to additional podcasts and YouTube videos where I go in depth about my explanation on how to go about that aspect of interviewing. So if you want kind of I realize I have a lot of content now on interviewing, so if you want access to all my interview content in one spot, make sure to go check that out. Another thing I want to invite you to check out is in the past, I mentioned I talked about what to do during a demo lesson. Make sure to go check that out. I'll put a link in the description so you can go check out that week's content where I talk more about what you should be doing during a demo lesson. Now, To take this a step further, if you want to work more and ask me direct questions about interviewing, I want to invite you to check out the 3-day teacher interview event. This is an event where I dive deep into questions I get asked. It's live, so I answer questions. And then, even if you aren't catching this 3-day event live, I send you the replay to the 3 days where I talk about how to go from researching the district you're looking for all the way to how to prepare the night before or the week before, the couple days before leading up to your interview. If you want to take it a step further, I want to invite you to check out my program, Land Your Dream Job. This is my program where I condense all of my ideas and methods and frameworks to confidently landing your dream job in a single weekend. I go through the entire process, and these are potent lessons that ideally you can sit down and do the weekend before you start applying or the weekend in a single weekend, because reality is I don't want you spending weeks and months looking for a teaching position. I want you celebrating that you're graduating, celebrating, your summer, whatever it is. I don't want you stressed out about this. So I wanted to create a condensed program where I take all the strategies I've used with my coaching clients in the past, and I put in one program. So make sure to check that out. All right. That wraps up everything. If you have any questions about interviewing that you don't see an answer to, make sure to either drop a comment or send me a DM, and I'd be happy to chat. As always, remember, we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together. With all the love in the world, Helena, aka the President Teacher. See you next time, Teacher Bestie.